I enjoy studying population data, and there are many different trends, information regarding population data that I have found via my research very interesting. One of which would be information regarding population size and dwindling populations. In many parts of Europe, Asia, and Latin America, even in the United States, there are what is being referred to by demographers as dying populations. Dying populations refer to populations where the birth rate is lower than the death rate. And when the birth rate cannot, as demographers refer to it, replace the amount of people dying or the elderly population, it's seen as an unsustainable population, which could affect the longevity of said population and likewise potentially lead to the population's extinction. There are many theories as to why these populations are experiencing population decline, and those population theories can be anything from genetic to environmental. But in this dialogue, I don't want to focus on why these things are happening. Instead, I want to focus on what governments are doing in these different countries to help combat population decline. Not all countries facing population decline are providing incentives to counter this decline. But as per my research, China, Sweden, and as per a Vox article, quote, most Western European countries, Austria, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, South Korea, Singapore, Turkey, Japan, Parsis, Russia, Taiwan, Australia, Italy, and Estonia. These countries and geographic regions are paying, creating efforts for, and supporting their citizens to have more children, to counter a dying population. As per my research, these incentives have steadily increased population, so they indeed work, not to the effect of creating baby booms, but providing some efforts to conclude that incentives work. So it's not just being able to say, hey, we have a problem, but giving people, through incentives, a potential solution, which I think would be a great starting point. Incentives can be anything from money, which includes stipends, allowances, tax breaks, bounties, and bonuses. They can be material resources, such as earning clothes, cars, even refrigerators, and baby items. All of this for free. Incentives can also be policies, specialized facilities that can help parents and also enamor them to wanting more children, funding and campaigns, and even presidents urging people to have children. This article by BMC Public Health, entitled Changing Health Behaviors Using Financial Incentives, a review from Behavioral Economics, states, incentives are central to economics and are used across the public and private sectors to influence behavior. It also goes on to say in the main text, if we are going to use incentive schemes to influence health behaviors, then it is important that we give them the best chance of working. Behavioral economics integrates insights from psychology with the laws of economics and provides a number of robust psychological phenomena that help to better explain human behavior. This article by Very Well Mind, entitled The Incentive Theory of Motivation, states, actions are often inspired by a desire to gain outside reinforcement. The incentive theory is one of the major theories of motivation and suggests that behavior is motivated by a desire for reinforcement or incentives. Now, to provide my personal viewpoint regarding all of this, I believe that this is a valid/intelligent approach with regards to combating the difficulties plaguing populations. And these governments, they show that they like their citizens, and they may have their reasons. In fact, in doing my research and reading the different articles, they made it seem like the reasons are, oh, well, governments need workers, economies need this and that. And it sounded so professional and vague and not necessarily what I perceive regarding other populations, which is that they simply want to exist, and that it doesn't have to be a technical reason and it doesn't have to be devoid of any emotionalism, but that they genuinely care about their populations. And that could be, yes, alongside of the practicalities of existence, but that they see the worth and the value innately within themselves, and because of this are striving to fulfill sentience in a vast way. What these incentives tell me is that these other populations, yes, they want to exist, they care about themselves enough, but they're not just going to want themselves to exist. They're going to prove how much they want themselves to exist. And they're going to prove it utilizing measures that put a price tag, put a statement of worth to their people, which I think is largely endearing, a large compliment to show that you value your people so much. You're going to find ways to keep them alive. You're going to find ways to show them that we're going to benefit you and your families. I often think about incentives with regards to our population, not just the ones that can come from outside interests, but even what would be our incentive with regards to existing. When you look at our population's position all over the world, it's not an ideal place to be politically, infrastructurally, economically, generationally. It's not an ideal place to be with regards to enjoying the capacity of our human activity. Instead, it tends to be very corrupt, violent, and a place that has no refuge. And yet people continue to exist. And I'm not sure that we make sense in simply existing and surviving, but with no real point. It often makes me wonder, what is the incentive of people existing under these conditions? But if you're going to exist under these conditions, what is the incentive in just sustaining that? When do we collectively say, hey, this is not good, and then working together to find the right solutions to shift our predicament? We're talking a population of ours which is facing worldwide poverty. If we had the incentives that other populations are having to have kids, then our population would be extremely wealthy, because we tend to have, as per my research, young populations, high birth rates, and baby booms. Our governments are not giving us incentives anytime soon. And I even remember an article, and it talked about Sweden has, and I'm just paraphrasing the title, incentives, why doesn't the US? And I thought, well, you know why? Why doesn't any country with a sizable assortment of our people care enough to provide incentives? Think about that. Likewise, why don't we care enough to provide each other incentives for not just merely existing, but in the quality of how we're existing? For example, why do people continue to have children knowing that there is no research to suggest it's beneficial to do so in broken homes? What is the incentive for that? If your children are going to grow up and they're 20 times likelier to commit crimes, or if they're going to be 11 times likelier to be incarcerated because of the conditions they're born into, you have to ask yourself, why do people justify that behavior? What is the incentive of our choices? What is the incentive of our misdeeds and misbehaviors? We don't think from an incentive level. I don't know what we're thinking, but it shows a lack of true value towards our life and the sanctity of our sentience. There is so much devaluation of life in two forms: in our ability to perceive ourselves as worthy enough to provide ourselves and each other with incentives to help benefit our place in this world, and our lack of value of life comes from our inability to create solutions when you know there are many problems. We need to have an incentive-based mindset in pretty much all areas of activity. If we want people to behave in ways or live up to ways, or all the themes that can come with motivating people via incentive to better us, then we need to give them something. There has to be, on a tangible level, reasons so that we can qualitatively shape our sentience, or quantitatively cause people to value what life means within us, so that they don't look at our numbers and see it as a burden, but instead looks at our numbers and see it as a gift. Also, take a look at the hypocrisy with all of this. We are known as the people living off our governments, and yet anywhere you go in the world, our governments do not protect us or value us at all. And anywhere you go in the world, there are no incentives for you to mainly exist. So isn't it interesting? We are the face of that, and yet other groups, and this is no hyperbole, are literally being paid to exist. It's about time we look at our population and harvest them as human resources the way other groups are doing for themselves. And maybe, just maybe, we can get somewhere as a populace with regards to rising our sense of worth. We need to see the material benefit. We need to see the immaterial benefit of us. We also need to incentivize ourselves and really think with regards to incentives about shaping ourselves, not just aimlessly existing or aimlessly birthing like factories, but really shaping the quality of life around our existence. We can learn a lot from how other populations see themselves. And yes, they have their strengths and their weaknesses. And we have our strengths and our weaknesses. But we need to start looking at what would be our collective strength and really building from that. It's really sad to see that there's so much anti-life surrounding us. Meanwhile, we are a human resource. We need to see the wealth in ourselves as a resource. We need to be able to move forward as a resource. We need to be able to see that we can do much if we just, as a group, pulled ourselves as a resource together and really crossed, whether it's cultural barriers, language barriers, geographic barriers, tribe barriers, etc., barriers, so that we can see our aim in this world. We need to know that other groups are not going to help you. So what are we going to do to help ourselves? They are incentivizing families. They are incentivizing marriage. They are creating a culture that fuels life. And in all capacities, you can see that there is an incentive and a motivation for them to have loyalty to themselves, to have value for themselves. What are we going to do that for ourselves? We need to exchange our current self-loathing and nonsensical behaviors as well as our anti-life proportions with more of an incentive/solution-based mindset. And hopefully we can do that in this new era. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Gershly Karen Pierre and I'm pro-marriage and pro-the nuclear family. Stay tuned for more.